This episode of This Is My Bourbon Podcast is brought to you by the Distillery. Hey everybody, it's Perry. Just wanted to stop in here for a quick second before we got into the episode. First off, Happy New Year to everybody. Of course, hope that you had a wonderful New Year's Eve and that your year is getting off to a great start. As you can probably tell, this is not our 2018 wrap-up episode. That is actually going to be coming out next week. We have not had a chance yet to record that, so I just wanted to let you know of that. But this episode is a whole lot of fun. I recorded it with Dave Jennings, who is RareBird101 over on Instagram and Twitter, and he has his wonderful little blog. He is a huge wild turkey enthusiast. You get to hear a lot about what he feels about wild turkey and all the reasons that he is so attracted to it as well. So hope you enjoyed this episode. Before we get into it, though, I wanted to also talk about our sponsor, of course, the Distillery. They are a wonderful company who build lamps out of used bourbon bottles. I have one myself. It is a Blanton's bottle that sits on top of a barrel head and is surrounded by the Blanton's corks, which of course spell out the name Blanton's. So definitely go and check them out. They are at the Distillery over on all the social media channels, so be sure to give them a follow and everything. Let them know I sent you. With that, we are going to hop right into the episode. So I hope you enjoy. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of This Is My Bourbon Podcast. I'm Perry, and I'm your host, and I'm so happy to have you guys along for this really awesome episode that has been kind of in the works for a little while and finally got around to making this a reality. And I'm super stoked to have this special guest on. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dave, or as you might know him, RareBird101. Dave, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
So for some of you, this is actually going to be a little bit of a retread because we are filming this live via Google Hangouts for our patrons. So patreon.com/mybourbonpodcast is where you can actually see the recording of this episode if you want to do just that. So please go ahead and go check that out if you are at all interested. But for anybody who's here for the first time, welcome in. Happy to have you, rather. So we're going to have a really great episode where we're just talking nothing but turkey and maybe a little bit other stuff, but we'll get there. We'll get there. But first, we got to start out with what our warm-up pour is. So, Dave, what are we warming up with?
I've got just Wild Turkey 101.
Just regular old Turkey 101.
That's right. Old Faithful. This is a recent bottle. That's great.
Yeah, you were saying that you were having some trouble finding 2018 bottles.
That's right. Yeah. I'm not like I'm searching high and low for them because I know they'll come around eventually. But I did find a pint and some little 100 milliliters. And I'm always, trying to figure out, are the batches improving? Are they, changing? And the only way to do that is to get out there and buy them and try them. So how has 101 kind of evolved for you then? Has it gone a more positive way, or do you kind of find yourself yearning for the old days of Turkey 101? Yeah, it's a tough question. Things are going to change. It's inevitable. It happens with all the producers. Heaven Hill doesn't taste like Heaven Hill from the 90s. And I mean, it's just, there's something that happened, and there's a lot of different reasons, that changed the profile over the years. Now, if I'm in the mood for a dusty wild turkey pour, then it's hard to find something similar, but dusty turkey. But more often than not, I prefer, on a regular basis, the more modern profile. And then somewhere in between, you have what I call the classic profile, which is kind of like the transition from the old dusty profile to the modern profile. And that time period, things can vary greatly. You can have some pours that pretty much just taste almost dusty. And then you have some that kind of have a modern edge to them. So they vary there. Like I said, on a more regular basis, I'm just looking for Russell's Reserve Single Barrel, Wild Turkey 101, Rare Breed 101 6.8, and those satisfy me just fine. Just fine.
Well, they're all great everyday sippers, you know.
That's right.
At the same time, they're all so diverse in their functionality. I mean, whether it's, you know, neat pours or you're trying to kind of spruce up cocktails to make them a little bit more spirit forward, you know, I think that turkey is inevitably the most versatile bourbon out there.
I would have to agree with that. And it's not just because I'm a fan of it, because that's kind of what got me into it. I mean,
sure.
You've probably heard the story before. I've been on other podcasts, and you know, it goes back to me chasing all of these highly sought after whiskeys and settling for Wild Turkey 101 because, you know, it's there. And then, you know, I realized that, God, you know, this is great. I mean, and it's not expensive and it's everywhere. I mean, you can go to any restaurant, you know, and it's there, you know,
absolutely.
And it's not hard to find. And it's just damn good, man. I mean, that is
no ifs, ands, or buts about that.
That's
one,
right. I mean, how many people do you see or hear knock Wild Turkey 101? Or let me rephrase that. How many experienced bourbon drinkers do you find knocking 101? It has got to be less than 10%. I mean,
absolutely. I mean, it's kind of it seems to me like it's kind of the dark horse in the daily drinkers. And more often than not, when I get asked the question, what's your daily drinker? What are you sipping on? Just kind of as, you know, you're not thinking about it. Turkey 101's my answer.
Right.
And I am getting more used to it, but I'm also typically pretty surprised by the looks that I tend to get from people when I do say that.
Right.
And it's this really secret hidden gem that I think people are starting to catch on to a little bit more too. I mean, especially during the bourbon boom. Right. But I think overall, you know, that I don't see this one going away like some of our favorite daily drinkers have.
Right. I guess you're referring to the Heaven Hill Bottled and Bond.
See, we were going to talk a little bit other than that.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I was a big fan of the old Heaven Hill Bottled and Bond, which was not age stated. You know, the gold, black, red label that they discontinued a few years ago. And I was a fan of that. It was a very cheap. You could buy a fifth for like $12 or something. Yeah. And it's good stuff. But you know, things change. I understand that. And the good news is that fans of either of the Heaven Hill Bottled and Bonds can pick up Wild Turkey 101, and you're going to get just as high quality, if not higher, quality of a pour. It may be a little bit more expensive, but honestly, the maturity of Wild Turkey 101 is frankly a little higher than the Heaven Hill Bottled and Bond.
Yeah.
So.
And I agree with that too. And I especially like the fact, I mean, sure, it may be, you know, just one proof point higher, but you know, there's something about that 100 to 110 range that really does just sit so well on my palate.
Yep.
And, you know, I'm able to find it around here for $20 a bottle. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't find anything that is as good as Turkey 101 is at that price point. I mean, it just it just doesn't exist.
Right. You can find handles on sale. Sometimes you can find handles for $26, $27. I mean, that's just hard to beat. It really is.
Totally. So let's kind of get into a little bit of what we have planned. And part of this is going to be, you sent me very graciously this wonderful little flight of different turkey bottlings. Okay. And one of them, while we're on the topic of 101, I figure we'll go ahead and talk about this one. Mm-hmm. One of them was an 04 101. Mm-hmm. And I've had this on the show before. I've had it on a live stream before. And I'm just absolutely over the moon about it. I think it's fabulous. Mm-hmm. But what was it about this one that, made you say he needs to try this?
Well, actually, I had lucked out and found a store that had a bunch of them. I picked up probably 6 or so, mostly liters of different 2000s 101, and most of them were 04, and I had a few 05s, and then I found a bunch of half pint 05s, and then the 06 and the 07. But the 04, it has a nice little pinch of funk to it, I would say. It's not dusty. You could call it dusty. It's it's a 14 year old bottle that's been sitting there.
Say, what's the statute of limitations on dusties here? Like,
not to change the subject, but in my opinion, if something's been sitting there for 10 years or more, I think it's fair to call that dusty. It may not be dusty profile, but it's a dusty bottle.
And it depends on if the people smoke in the store or
that or if it's sitting in the sun, you don't want that. I thought that you would like it because it has a nice, what I call the classic profile to it. And if you look at it just visually, it's darker than the 101 you pour now. What that means exactly, it probably means that there is either A, some older juice in there, or B, it's because of that low entry proof, and there's a lot less dilution. So it's the one or two of those things, or both of them together.
And Turkey's kind of famous for having changed their barrel entry proof multiple times over the past.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Twice.
So have you been able to notice, specific differences?
Yes.
They've changed that? Okay, wait, so what exactly, or, kind of ballpark have you been able to notice about?
Well, the 110 entry proof only happened for a year or so. So you're not really going to, nail that down, to a specific expression or something. Sure. But if you want to talk about the original 107 entry proof that had been for the longest time, going as far as I know back when it was JTS Brown, even the Rippey Distillery, you had that 107 entry proof. It's possible that was something unique that Jimmy did, but I know it's always been low. And that changed in 2004 to 110, and then in 2006 to 115, and that's where it's at now. So mainly what you're going to find is that the older 107 entry proof gives you a little bit richer of a profile. It's not what I would call the end all be all of this is what made the dusty profile, because that's not true, because there were a lot of releases, in the 2000s and even the early 2010s that were in that old entry proof, and they don't taste like dusty Wild Turkey. They don't taste like 70s or 80s or 90s Wild Turkey. So you can't say it's just the entry proof. But it does have, like I said, kind of a classic profile there. And then as the entry proof was changed, more specifically in 2006, and you're drinking what we're drinking now, that you find on the shelves now, you find it's not younger, but it has just a little bit more of a grain edge to it. It's not bad. Okay. Absolutely. It's just got more of a grain edge to it. And it really depends on the year too. I mean, if you have something like Decades, you're not really going to taste as much as what I call the modern profile. You're going to get more of a combination of the classic and the modern, and that's because it has 10-year in it, and then it has the 20-year in there as well. So you get that mix. But the entry proof is still relatively low if you compare it to Beam.
Absolutely.
Or some of the Buffalo Trace mash bills. It's still a very low entry proof in comparison to some other distilleries there. So I think the most interesting thing to me about Wild Turkey, specifically the bourbon, is that you have this one mash bill that creates such unique profiles.
Right.
And it is it's astounding, honestly.
Yeah.
Because you can have such variance in the single barrels and good variance, not bad variance. And you could have 2 Russell's Reserve single barrels bottled in the same year and taste completely different in many ways,
Absolutely.
And so I find that fascinating.
And to kind of piggyback off of that too, I mean, this is a mash bill that has stayed consistent for decades too. And so I think what's so cool about Turkey specifically and the way that they approach their whiskeys is that they're not going, well, let's try a wheated mash bill, or try, a super, super high rye recipe or anything. They're taking the same thing that's worked for forever and just experimenting with it. You know? And I always go back to this phrase, this is, Turkey is the exact opposite embodiment of this phrase, and it's, you can't polish a turd. And, I think that Turkey is doing everything right to where you go, they don't have anything to fix.
Right.
They don't have anything to fix.
Right.
But I do want to kind of back up a little bit, because I figured I'd ask you some more, general questions and get to know you a little bit more as a bourbon drinker too. So one of the things, of course, that I like to ask people who are new to the show is, how'd you get into bourbon?
Okay. Well, it's something I've enjoyed for years, casually. Going back to my college years in the 90s, I always appreciated like a Jim and Coke or a Jack and Coke or something like that. It was never a straight pour. But bourbon's always been, I've never been one into vodka or gin or any of these types of things, so I guess it's the Southern boy in me. But, I've always appreciated that. And so, go out to eat or whatever, I'd get, a Jim and Coke or something.
Sure.
But it was about 5 years ago or so, and I was at my brother-in-law's house, and he poured it was one of these limited edition Crown Royal whiskeys over the rocks. And I'd never really taken whiskey like that before. Prior to that, it was like maybe shots in college, or like I said, mixed drinks, and right. Never even been into cocktails really. So I was like, wow, this is good. I like this. And so I got into just whiskey in general. I started exploring, Scotch, Irish, blended whiskeys. And then I circled back to bourbon, which kind of was where I started. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that there was a lot more to bourbon than just Jim White Label. And so you start buying, and I would start with pints and this kind of thing, really dipping my toes in. Then I got into chasing some of the more sought after ones. But I would just go back to Turkey, because you could just get a pint of it. Like if you were buying a bottle of something like mid-shelf, Elijah Craig or something, you would check out and you'd say, well, just, I'll just get a Wild Turkey 101 and throw in with it. And I just kept coming back to it,
Yeah.
And so a couple years ago, I was online and somebody had asked me if I'd ever tried Dusty Turkey. Of course, I had not. I'd had Wild Turkey in college, but it was not like that.
Everybody had turkey in college.
That's right. And, I was like, wow, this is excellent. Like it was just, It was better than anything I had found to date, on the shelves. And so it kind of just set me off on this journey, because my immediate thing was to try to find something comparable that you could find retail at the store, which is unrealistic. You're not going to, unless you luck out and find some honey hole that has some old bottles sitting there, you're not going to find it in a modern release. But what I did find was that I appreciated the modern expressions for what they were. And then I got into researching the brand. And I was just soaking it up, reading everything I could, watching videos on YouTube. And I realized that there was so much more to Wild Turkey than bourbon. The story, of the Russells, and Jimmy and how he got started, and how he, like you said, that mash bill that never changed, that it never changed because Jimmy would never change it,
Right.
And it was really just a lot. There's a lot there. And then also like the fact that Wild Turkey is, and you kind of touched on this briefly, where people kind of give you the looks. Wild Turkey is kind of the underdog,
Absolutely.
At least to the average American, it has kind of a reputation that's not deserved. And I kind of like that. I kind of like being on the underdog side a little bit. All those things combined, but mainly the profiles. I just enjoy it, how it tastes. So that's kind of where I started, my bourbon journey was, in college and mixed drinks and this type of thing. And then working into just whiskey in general. and then finding wild turkey and discovering that it was for me. It's what I love.
To kind of touch on one of the points that you just made there about turkey being the underdog, turkey's getting a lot more publicity now.
There's this guy that blogs about it, I know.
Well, regardless of that one guy, there's also, star power attached to it.
That's true.
I mean, Matthew McConaughey is, becoming, for lack of a better phrase, the face of the brand right now. Is that something that excites you in terms of being a turkey drinker, that more people are getting exposure to it? Or, does it kind of worry you about the future of the brand?
I don't worry about it one bit. I think that I really don't. And here's why I don't worry about it. Because I know it's in good hands. I know as long as Jimmy, Eddie, or Bruce has their hands on the wheel, there is nothing to worry about there.
Amen.
What McConaughey does is bring a new audience in. And the expressions that he's offering them are not necessarily expressions that I'm reaching for every day. Long Branch, the 81 proof, just wild turkey straight bourbon.
Sure.
He's reaching out to a new audience. He's reaching out to 20s, people in their 20s. He's reaching out to, a female audience that probably would have never given wild turkey the time of day in the past.
Sure.
There's plenty of female bourbon enthusiasts, and they
Absolutely.
love wild turkey, but I'm talking about a different, demographic. And I think that he's kind of breaking new ground there for the brand. And I think that's a great thing, because the better the brand does, the more that wild turkey will be able to get into doing new and better things. Not that I want them to go off and do crazy experimentation, this kind of stuff, but things like Revival is just one example of something experimental, but done tastefully. And in they didn't really just go off the road. I mean, they stayed on that wild turkey road. It just kind of changed things a little bit. And it was great. Revival's awesome.
I completely agree with you.
and so that's what I like. And McConaughey bringing that attention to the brand, it helps, of course, it's going to profit. It's going to do better, and they'll be able to do more things with that. But as long as Eddie, Jimmy, Bruce are there, I think that we've got nothing to worry about. And I've been particularly impressed with Bruce lately. That Dad's Drinking Bourbon podcast with him. And then the podcast that he did with One Nation Under Whiskey, both of those excellent. And he just, really, if you haven't, I know you said you listened to the Dad's Drinking Bourbon one.
I have.
Catch the One Nation Under Whiskey, because there's he talks about Doretta, his grandma, in there. And it just really paints this picture. And it's not a fabrication. It's like you get this inside view of what it's like to be, in that inner circle of the Russells. And it's so genuine, and it's like kind of like the genuine quality of the whiskey just is blended with the genuine quality of the Russells. They're kind of one and the same.
Absolutely. Yeah. While we're on the topic of Bruce too, I have to ask, and actually the topic of Revival too. 10 years ago, do you think that a product like Revival could have existed without one Bruce Russell? Because it seems like he had a huge hand in that becoming something again.
The answer is yes and no. And here's why. There was a product like that 10 years ago, and it was called Sherry Signature. It was a wild turkey release where Jimmy had essentially, I don't know if it was so much sherry finished, it was sherry enhanced. So it could have been, had some sherry in it. I don't know exactly. I haven't been able to get the exact story on what made sherry, but it was like, an 80 proof, wild turkey that, and it was a European release. And that was one of the inspirations for, Revival. Now, Eddie admits that Sherry Signature is not that great, but he took that and said, I'm going to actually take this as inspiration and make something that is. Yeah. And he did really well. Now, reason why I say no, because I said yes and no. I think that, and I don't want to talk, bad about corporate ownership, but I think that they reached a point in the 2000s that Pernod gave up on Wild Turkey. I think that they were kind of done with the brand. Obviously, they sold it, because Campari purchased them.
Right.
And, but I think that they had kind of had their time with Wild Turkey. And I think that anything that Eddie brought forward as far as new ideas just really weren't given any type of attention. So you can see that once Campari has ownership of the brand, things change almost overnight. The releases start coming out, and people didn't notice this, but like Wild Turkey 81, okay, was a new release. I mean, prior to 2011 or so, there was Wild Turkey 80 proof.
Right.
And it really wasn't that great of a product. A lot of people chase these 80 proof Dusty's. I'll tell you, they aren't that great. There are some that are good, and there are some that are kind of like, I don't know about this, They're very variant there. Now, the 101 is rock solid, but and it varies some, but it varies some at a higher quality level. The 80 proof is hit or miss. And I'm not the first one to say that or notice it either. Chuck Cowdery was hard on the 80 proof, and there were a lot of people, and even Eddie, like I said, Eddie admits it. The 80 proof could have been better. When he made the 81 proof, sure, it's an 81 proof Kentucky Straight Bourbon whiskey that's probably 4 to 6 years or so, but it holds its own with Jim White Label, which is the most important thing, because Jim White Label is it's the highest selling bourbon in the world. So that is Wild Turkey's White Label. Okay. So that was 2011. That came out. Then, you had Russell's Reserve Single Barrel come out around 2013. Huge release. I mean, you had Wild Turkey Kentucky Spirit prior to that, which was the single barrel. But now you've got this 110 proof, non-chill filtered, single barrel product.
Right.
And it to this day now, I mean, since that's come out, I mean, that's pretty much my favorite Wild Turkey product is Russell's Reserve Single Barrel. If somebody said, what's your favorite? And that I can go get, it's going to be Russell's Reserve Single Barrel. That's a new product. And then you see different releases. Diamond was more for Jimmy's anniversary, but you have this Master's Keep series, Long Branch. You have the Single Barrel Rye. So there are a bunch of things that Campari comes in and they just kind of, they put an actual investment in. They got a new visitor center. They got a new distillery. I mean, they made a huge difference. They took it to the next level, and Pernod was just not doing that. Again, I'm not trying to speak bad about, I'm sure they had their reasons, but I have to commend Campari on that because they saw something there, and I know a lot of people, they don't like corporate ownership in this, but it's just a fact of the matter. And it's just what happens. You have very few privately owned distilleries. And so it's just, you need that cash, to be able to do new things. And I think that Campari's done an excellent job with that.
I totally agree with you. And I have to ask you too, what's as the turkey super fan, what's your relationship like with Campari?
I think it's pretty good.
Yeah.
I get along very well with the state manager, and I get along very well with one of the vice presidents for the company on the national level. And I have to keep a distance somewhat because, I have to be a critic, and I have to be honest. And matter of fact, the other night I sent an email to Campari and I said, I just want to let you know, I appreciate all that you do for Wild Turkey, but I'm going to have to tell you that, I value that you let me be honest. And I've been very tough over the last few weeks on the Kentucky Spirit bottle. I
knew that's where you were going with that.
And I'm going to remain tough on it because it sucks. I mean, I'm just going to say it. The new design is awful. Yeah. And I said, I really appreciate you allowing me, to be honest like that because, my blog is kind of unique. I mean, a lot of the other whiskey blogs, some of them are just absolutely great, but they cover a massive catalog. Even if it's niched in bourbon, they have a massive catalog there from craft to high end. But I'm so dedicated to Wild Turkey that, I worry sometimes like, am I going to say the wrong thing, and this goes away? And thankfully, they have been very, very kind to me, and respectful of my honesty, even when sometimes it's not something that they probably don't want to hear. Yeah, I mean, if it's something they don't want to hear. So, I just try to be as honest and fair as I can and call it like I see it.
And I think, too, the fact that they have somebody like you to, in essence, kind of keep them in check, to allow them to kind of take a step back and go, well, what worked about this? What didn't work about this? And at its basis level, every product that gets released by a distillery is, in essence, an experiment. What's going to work in the market, because you don't know how that's going to how it's going to be reacted to until it's actually out there in the world.
That's a good point.
And the fact that they have somebody like you to step up and say, this just wasn't your best effort, or this was incredible, absolutely blew my expectations out of the water. That you're doing the bourbon drinkers work here by, being honest. And, I'm sure that you face your critics too, and even as big of a turkey super fan as you are, I know that there've got to be people out there who go, well, he's, he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Well, what you say is very kind. I appreciate that. Period. I do have the occasional person that gets unhappy with me for whatever reason. Sometimes it's just pure trolling, and I don't even pay those folks attention. I know you've dealt with stuff like that before. You had to shut down a podcast one time with that. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
But recently, this past week, I had a review of a Russell's Reserve single barrel, and there was someone that commented on it, and he was a little bit upset, like, well, oh, great, another review of a bottle I'll never be able to find. And, kind of went off like, because I had given some rickhouse descriptions of traits that I find in different rickhouses. He's like, yeah, now everybody's going to be chasing these rickhouses, and I really appreciate you doing that or whatever. And there was some sarcasm to it. It wasn't mean. It wasn't nasty. And I appreciate the person commenting. But the fact of the matter is, I review things that come to me that I find interesting. I have to want to write about it. I can't force myself to write. So it's not like I sit down and have this schedule for the year. Like, these are the bourbons I'm going to review this year. If something comes my way and I taste it, whether I don't like it or do like it, or I find something interesting about it, and I'm compelled to write about it, I'm going to. Yeah. And that bottle that I reviewed was actually something that I'd been wanting to write about for a while. I just had some other things come up that kind of kept me from doing that. And another thing too about reviewing single barrels is that, yes, you may not be able to find that exact single barrel. I could use the argument that this person had against Blanton's. I could use it against Elmer T. Lee.
Absolutely.
I could use it against any of these things that are single barrel. And I could say, wait a minute, any blog post that's reviewing a single barrel bourbon whiskey, you're not going to be able to find that exact one. Probably not, especially if you're halfway across the country. It's to give you an idea of what that expression can offer on a different day, on a different bottle, from a different vendor, from a different rickhouse. It's to me, I appreciate reviews of whiskeys that I'm never going to have just because I want to know what they taste like. Some of these legendary pours, these Willet pours and stuff like that, I enjoy reading the reviews of them because I'm never going to taste them. I'm certainly never going to own them. And I'm like, so what does it taste like? And I love it when folks give their notes and descriptions and that kind of thing. And, I kind of enjoy it through them,
Sure.
And I think there are people that like that. And so that's why I write about things that you may never be able to taste. And I don't hold it against that person commenting. I welcome any comments on my website, and I'll be glad to discuss, any issues folks have. I love having, debates as long as they stay, friendly. Mm-hmm.
Civil, right.
That's right. Yeah.
And again, too, I just to kind of harp on, and maybe at some point I'll get off of the RareBird 101 high horse, but it speaks volumes to your character too, that again you are able to step back too and understand where you sit as a reviewer of this product too, and it can still maintain conversation with people who may not be willing to have the same kind of conversations that you are.
Well, I appreciate it. I just try to, I feel like, and I briefly mentioned this the last time I was on Bourbon Pursuit, is I feel like there's more good in the hobby than bad. You're going to have some sour folks every once in a while, and they may have their reasons, and there may be reasons I don't know about. But I think for the most, it's very positive. It's very friendly. I have
Definitely.
far more fun conversations and in-depth, informative conversations than I do, negative conversations. And so, if it happens every once in a while, that's fine. We'll give it a go and see if we can iron it out. And if not, you go your way, I'll go mine. And
yes, sir.
I'll just sip my 101.
Well, speaking of sipping, let's pour something.
Okay. All right.
So I'm curious. I'm going to kind of let you be the guide on this because you sent me two similar pours.
Okay.
I have a feeling that they're going to be pretty different. So we could go about this one of two ways. And it kind of depends on how many glasses you have in front of you.
Okay.
If you've got two glasses, I say we pour both of these two Russells side by side so we can kind of compare them a little bit.
Well, I tell you what, I don't have any of the 03 that I sent you.
Oh, really?
So you save that.
Great.
For a special time. But I have the 05 Russell's Reserve 10-year, which looks like this.
Oh,
now, there were several years with this label.
Mm-hmm.
This one is unique. It does not have the embossing on the glass. Starting mid-2006, they said Jimmy Russell here.
Right.
It does not have that. It has a black ink code on the back to let you know it's 2005. This is prior to the transition in bottling facilities when it was moved to Arkansas. This is a different whiskey than you're going to find in mid-2006 forward. This is essentially what I think is underproofed 101 12-year. I think this is whiskey that was made for 101 12 that just did not hit that 101 mark because that low entry proof. So you're going to find a very dusty pour with a lot of depth. And you can just look at the color of this and how dark it is for 90 proof is just amazing.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not the only one that is aware of this. This is kind of a fan favorite here for a lot of folks. And I know that I got to get this wiped off here. I know that Dixon Dedman, for example, he's a big fan of this one.
Yes, he is. He specifically talked about that when I had him on the show.
Did he? Okay.
Yes.
I need to check that out.
Oh, you really should.
Dixon's a great guy. He is.
Oh, I love him to death.
But you can just, immediately, and you probably can tell there are some similarities to the 04 101 that you have, but it's richer and there's a lot more butterscotch in this. It's like a
absolutely
heavy butterscotch.
It's the sweetness that kind of separates it from a lot of, the turkey pours that are around today. But at the same time, they're you talked about that like dustiness, and it does kind of have that kind of dusty funk to it on the nose.
Heavy.
Yeah. I mean, I would be hesitant to say, if I didn't know what year it was from, that it weren't from even, at the earliest, the early 90s. Mean, it maintains a lot of that dusty funk.
This to me is better than, I have some 101.8s from the mid 90s, export 101.8s from the mid 90s. Particularly 93, 94. This is better than that. And this is just, to me, this is one of my favorite wild turkeys. And can still be found. Well, maybe not now. But it can still be found.
After this episode.
I found some, that were $30 on the shelf. Found. Yeah, and there are some 06s like this too. But you have to be careful. It's early 06 has the non-embossed glass and the black coat on the back label. Those are good. But the 05s are guaranteed like this.
And this is fantastic.
It is, isn't it?
I mean, it's so funny because the nose is where all of that dustiness is present. But once it gets to the palate, it's not quite there as much.
Right.
It's still a little present, but it takes a back seat to the rest of these really rich flavors that are present. And I think this is an absolutely fabulous expression of turkey. And I can understand why people covet this in the way that they too.
It almost has a, one thing I've noticed too about, there are some of the early 90s 1018s, like 91 and 92. They have like this little tinge of, it's almost like a port finish.
Yeah.
And it has kind of like on the palate, there is like this kind of like a port finish. It's really strange. It's, if I were to taste this blind, that would kind of be on my mind. I'd be like, wait a minute, was this cask finished or something? It just has a lot of flavor to it, and like I have some Armagnacs, and this has a very Armagnac-like quality to it.
Yeah.
Again, that grape kind of thing. It's raisins, there's some raisins or plums, more like plums, yes. Heavy plum. Absolutely. In this. It's excellent.
I tend to identify those quote unquote grapey notes as more of the oakiness. Mm-hmm. So I'm totally on board with you. It's just
the sweet oak.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sweet musty oak.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. This is so good. Yeah. Man.
It's excellent.
I'm trying to process it too in the midst of talking about it. So while I'm processing, I have to ask you, every way that you present yourself as a turkey drinker, everything that you say in reference to your experiences with Wild Turkey as a brand kind of lends itself to this notion that you know a little bit more about turkey than most folks do. So are you a Wild Turkey expert?
I'm not an expert. I don't want that title.
We had this conversation recently too, but I wanted to establish this on the podcast.
I'm no Minnick. I'm no Michael Beach. I'm no Chuck Cowdery. I'm a huge fan. If anything, I'll accept I'm a Wild Turkey researcher because I do heavily research it. And I'm working on a book right now, so I'm really dug into that.
Are you really?
Yeah, I really am.
Oh my gosh, man. That's so exciting.
Yeah, I'm over halfway into it. And there's a lot there. I will tell you that there's some really interesting history early on that I think a lot of folks are going to take from when they finally get to read it. But and it's not just history. I've got a section on appreciation and this type of thing. So it goes through the different expressions and stuff. But I'll take researcher. I'll take super fan. I don't want to say expert because the real experts are Jimmy and Eddie and Bruce, and even Joanne. I mean, the Russells. I mean, they're there. They learn, all this stuff from a very early age, and they have all this experience and hands-on, and there's a culture there that I'm really not even privy to, and I hope to be a part of that one day. I hope to go and meet all the different folks that work there and their jobs. And I have a lot of research planned for next year to finish up my book. And I want to kind of really dig in and get to know everybody in their different positions and what they do and what's the daily workflow. So I'm no expert. There are plenty, and there's plenty of people that, blog and write stuff that probably know a lot more than me about it. But they have so much in their brain with other distilleries that, it's like they have a perfect memory, but they don't have total recall or whatever you want to say. It's like, I'm sure it's in there. They just, it's not what they focus on.
All right. So you just confirmed that sometime next year you're going to be coming up to Kentucky. So I'm going to go ahead and establish a formal invitation to have you on the show.
Oh, awesome.
In person or just hang out and have a couple pours, I mean, regardless, that is going to happen when you come up here.
Great.
So yeah, I'm incredibly excited about the book now that I know that that's something that's in the works. Cause I always enjoy reading your posts and seeing what your insights are into turkey, not just as a product, but the brand as a whole and the culture and everything. So that's,
well, thank you. My goal is to, we did some special things for Jimmy and Eddie for the 101 anniversary. And I was trying to think of what would be special, what would be special next year for Jimmy's 65th. And I think that book, if I could get it finished, I think that would be, just the perfect thing to have for his 65th anniversary, because I really want to make sure that I get his sign off on it. I want to make sure that it covers the topics that he wants to talk about, what he wants, in there. And it would be nice to have that finished by then. I've also got some barrel picks planned for next year. And I've got some themes already decided. I'm not going to spoil them because,
That's okay. That's okay.
I've got some themes there that I'm going to be working on. And so really looking forward to what's to come there.
Well, I hate to kind of dampen the mood here a little bit, but you brought up the special things that you did this year for the 101st anniversary, combined anniversary. And one of them was the 1 in a century barrel pick.
Right. I got it right here if folks want to see it. Right
yes. I love that label. I love the throwback to the cheesy gold foil style. It's just,
I can't take complete credit for that.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm just expressing
a couple friends help with that, and they did a great job coming up with it and designing it. But the only thing I can take credit for is the 1 in a century. But I know where you're going with this. The secondary flips.
To kind of give people a little bit of a background too. So this was a single barrel that you and a team of turkey fans picked in honor of this year being a combined 101 years of employment or service, I guess, at Wild Turkey between Jimmy and Eddie Russell. And 1 in a century was that was your pick for this. And unfortunately, it has kind of gained some negative traction in terms of where it's gone in its life past its intention.
Yeah, right.
And that's a nice way of saying that people have flipped it on the secondary market.
Yeah.
And you were very unhappy about, understandably so, very unhappy about that.
Yeah, well, to start back from the beginning, I had decided early on that I was going to do something for the 101 anniversary because Campari didn't really have anything planned for it. And in their defense, they had a lot of changes going on this year. They moved from San Francisco to New York. They lost some key personnel in that move. So I'm not coming down on them, and I'm not defending them. I'm just saying it is what it is. So I decided if I pick a barrel this year, I'm going to make the theme of it the 101 anniversary. And some friends of mine, Bryant and Ryan, we worked together on a label. The barrel was actually picked by me and Adam Howard of Lexington Beverage Outlet in Columbia, South Carolina, with Eddie. Okay, so it was 3 people picking the barrel, but there were other people involved in the design. And then I had Ben, who also helped out in the actual printing, and he did a great job because, man, does it not look like an actual cheesy gold foil label.
It really does. It really does.
And
caught me off guard the first time I saw it. I'm going to be honest with you.
It's cool. But, most of them were reserved for patrons through my Patreon site. And, so the majority of them were eaten up that way. We had, a few cases at the store, and we expected them to last a couple days at least. And, the store manager was very careful to make sure that, people just didn't come in there and clean out cases and this kind of stuff.
Right.
I think the most someone left with was 2 bottles. But they were gone in like about 3 hours or something. Like before people could even get to their lunch breaks to like get out and get them, they had already disappeared. And, at first I'm thinking, well, let's just hope the folks that did get them were ones that really wanted them. And the first day went by, and I thought, okay, we're okay. And then that next day was when they started going up on Facebook. And, I can't do anything about the secondary, but the thing that really bothered me the most, and I know it bothered several other people as well, was that one of the posts had Eddie. I had given Eddie a bottle of it just as a thank you, for the day we had. And they had used that picture. They had used that exact picture, like, Eddie apparently loves it, or something. And it made it a sales pitch. And that was just not cool. I did not like that at all.
You say
the price was outrageous,
You say that with a smile on your face, but I can totally
hear and feel just the frustration behind that.
It was at the time. It was rough. I've put it behind me now. I've moved on, so I'm more positive tonight. But at the time, it was quite devastating. Enough to make me, I normally post on Tuesdays. My blog posts are usually every Tuesday, and I stayed up. I mean, it was bothering me so bad. I was sick as well, but I stayed up Saturday night till like 2 a.m. I mean, I was just typing away, and I'm like, I'm just gonna. I put off doing something about it. I'd made some comments on Reddit. I'd made some comments on Instagram, but I had not sat down and addressed it formally, and it had weighed on me. And I was like, after that second posting of one for sale, I was like, I really just need to do something about this. And I opened the floodgates. I sat down and I was just typing away, and I was up like 2 a.m. I just typed that all in one sitting. Of course, Joshua had done the review there, and I copied and pasted that in.
Right.
But and I thought Joshua did a very fair assessment of it.
I agree.
And the whole point was to illustrate that there were multiple things wrong with that flip. The Eddie picture was one thing that was just awful. The price was awful. But the thing that really blew my mind was that nobody had even tasted the damn thing. Like they had not. I mean, it's like, what are you doing, Mm-hmm. And I wanted someone to see another person's interpretation of what it tasted like to them, because it's not typical turkey. It doesn't taste like anything amazing. It's not, decades or anything like that, It had some favorable reviews this week on Reddit, and I was really happy to see that. But I expect some unfavorable reviews too. It's a very polarizing barrel pick. It really is. I went for something crazy. It just, I guess that's just what we're in now. We're in this thing where people are flipping single barrels because they have a sticker on them, or because they have wax on the top, or they have a dog tag, or I don't know, but the design I had was purely out of appreciation for Eddie and Jimmy.
Yeah.
And the ones I'm going to be doing next year are going to be the same way. I'm going to make sure that whatever I stick on a bottle that has my name or logo or website on it or anything like that, it is going to be respectful to the brand. It's going to be something I can be proud of. It's not going to be a money grab or a sticker game or any of this kind of stuff like that. And you have my promise on that, whatever I put on there. And then I'm also going to make sure that, if it has anything related to the Russells or Wild Turkey, I'm going to make sure that they're okay with it, because at the end of the day, it's their product and their name on the line.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I'm not going to go glamming it up, for some profits. It's just not going to do that, disrespectful.
And I completely agree with you. And honestly, when I first saw that this at its basis level special bottle mm-hmm. was being flipped on secondary in the situation that it was, and at the price that it was, it kind of broke my heart a little bit, because it, as much fun as we have with the bourbon community, as much as we invest into it, and as great as it can be at times, that is kind of the black spot on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of showed me that it's not always roses.
Right. It was a low point. It wasn't the lowest. I think there's been some other shady stuff that's happened, but it was a lower point. And like I said, I've gotten it behind me, but I understand exactly what you mean, because the first person, because I'm not on Facebook, someone messaged me a picture of it, and I saw it, and I was just like, oh damn, here it goes, And I thought that maybe this will be the only one, and sure enough, it wasn't. But I hate it because that bottle that individual didn't want for the right reason. He wanted it for the money.
Oh yeah.
That bottle, or those two bottles, or three, or however many ended up doing this, those wanted, there were other people that wanted those bottles is the best way for me to say that. There were other people who genuinely wanted them. Right. And it just,
I raised my hand for anybody not watching on Facebook.
It's sad. It's sad because I can't tell you, Perry. I mean, my inbox, and I'm not trying to boast or anything, but my inbox blew up when that thing hit. I'm sure it did. And I had to tell so many people no, that it was devastating because, you want to be able to say, yeah, it was a short barrel. It was a shorter barrel than we expected. It wasn't the shortest barrel this year because I've learned that there's a couple groups there's one group that has a barrel pick as low as 42.
Yep.
Again, Woodland Wine had that last year. And there's another group that has that this year. But 102 is still pretty damn short for a barrel of bourbon.
Man, it could have been 101 and you could have had
I know. You don't know how many times I've thought about that.
You know what? You could have just told them to keep one bottle back and gone, yep, it was great. It was just so serendipitous.
I really wish someone had, I really wish someone had. That would have been awesome.
Create your own legend, right?
Yeah. But it worked out fine. But, it is what it is. I can't do anything about the secondary.
Of course not. Well, let's just put it behind us then. How's
right.
That?
Well, what I think the lesson from it is this. I would love it if the next time someone does this, people just don't bite. Someone throws the hook out, they just dodge it.
Yeah.
And eventually, if that happens long enough, prices will go down to what they should be because it wouldn't. If the person had put it up there for $80. I don't think it would have bothered me that bad because it's like they went through the trouble to get it, and now they've got to, get it out to somebody, whatever like that. And I'm not saying there's a right or wrong to secondary, whatever, whatever. I'm just saying that $400 with a picture of Eddie on it is just dumb
and it wasn't
disrespectful.
And it wasn't even a picture of Eddie drinking it. It was just him shaking
Eddie
hands.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
There was no indication that he actually liked it.
Right.
I understand what you're getting at with that.
Yeah, it was just absurd. It was absurd, and there were other people that wanted it. So, whatever. But I'm not setting a value on to me, the bottle's worth $60. It's a $60 barrel pick. Anything above that, you're going to have to prove to me that it's worth the effort, but 400 is just, ain't no way, man.
All right. So we'll put this behind us. Let's lighten it up a little bit.
Right.
I was thinking about this because, I feel like this is a really great question to ask you.
Okay.
In particular, say you're given full control of the distillery.
Okay.
A day, a week, a month, however long it takes. You can decide barrel entry proof, aging, location, all that good stuff. Walk us through how you do that. What are you even able to walk us through how you do that?
I really wouldn't do that much different. I'm going to be straight honest with you. Here's what I would do. Here's what I would do different. I would keep the mash bill the same for the bourbon, but I would have two different entry proofs. And this is not my original idea. This is Bruce, okay?
Yeah.
I would have a run of 107, and that would be designed for certain expressions. And then I would have some with the 115 entry proof, and that would be for other expressions. And Bruce talked about hoping to experiment with that, and I hope he does because I think that will work very, very well. So keep the mash bill the same. Try two different entry proofs, and then those barrels go to different things. Okay.
Yeah.
That is a great idea. The only other thing that I would change would be, well, there's two things. I think that the rye, I love Jimmy to death, but the very, very low rye, the barely legal rye, I think that the younger rye, so we're talking the 81 proof,
right?
It just doesn't really shine with that recipe. I think
that's fair.
If they had a high rye, like MGP, like 95% rye, they could put out a 4-year, rye at 81 proof, and it would taste pretty good. It would taste like
Yeah.
bullet rye or something, you know?
Absolutely.
So I think that maybe there should be 2 rye recipes. I think that there should be a rye recipe that's high rye and use it for the younger products. And then you could have some special edition, you know, mature products with it as well.
Sure.
And then you can keep Jimmy's classic, barely legal rye recipe and continue on with the 6 and the single barrel and that kind of thing. Those would be 2 things I would look at, and I think that's a Bruce idea too. I think if I recall, Bruce mentioned something about experimenting with some higher rye, maybe not 95%, but higher than 51, and see where that goes. And I think both of those things would be great. I don't think they need to get into weeded stuff. I don't think they need to get into changing yeast, any of this kind of stuff. I think it just needs to be, you know, have maybe a different entry proof on the bourbon side, you know, and then have maybe a different rye recipe for different, you know, rye products. I think those 2 things would be things that change. The only other thing I'd change would be chill filtration. I think that they should do away with chill filtration on products that are over 100 proof. So the 101, the Rare Breed, you know, Wild Turkey Kentucky Spirit, Russell's Reserve Single Barrel is already NCF, but Russell's Reserve 10 could be NCF.
Sorry, I just got lost in the imagining Turkey 101 being non-chill filtered.
Yeah, imagine.
I went to a magical place there. Thinking about
that. I think that would be great. And there's no need for it. It's purely a cosmetic thing. There's no reason to have it over 86 proof, other than, you know, for cosmetic reasons.
Sure.
So those would be the things that I might change. And I don't even know if it would be an experimentation thing. You know, maybe I'm wrong about changing the rye recipe for the younger stuff. Maybe I'd try it, be like, you know what? No, Jimmy was doing right the whole time. And I think that's what Bruce is wanting to do. Bruce is wanting to he wants to stay, again, like we had talked about in the past revival, stay on the Turkey road, but just kind of drive it a different way, you know, and see what happens there. Other than that, you know, I think what Jimmy has done, you know, since he started in 54 and then he was master distiller by 67, what he's done there has just, it's incomparable. I mean, I cannot think of, there are plenty of great master distillers that have come and gone. And there's some that are still with us that are legendary, you know, living legends in a way. But what Jimmy has done, really, I don't think you can find another person that did it Jimmy's way and made it. You can find people that did it their own way and made it, like Bill Samuels or Elmer T. Lee. Yeah, and they approached the business from a different angle. You know, Elmer T. Lee, he got some investments from Japan with Age International and this type of thing, and he kept it alive. Bill Samuels, you know, did very well with marketing with Maker's Mark. And he had his own flair, his own way of doing things that was brilliant. No doubt about that.
Yeah.
What Jimmy did to survive that glut and to get Wild Turkey to where it is today is he just kept doing things the way he had been taught to do it. And he didn't stray from that. I mean, he did little things like honey and this type of stuff to kind of get some new people in. I don't think Jimmy sits around drinking American honey. I mean,
I don't really think he does either.
And he did the 86 proof and the 80 proof, and these were ways to try to stay alive. These were things he had to do out of necessity.
Right.
But for the most, he just kept doing things the Jimmy Russell way, which was the way that he had been taught, you know, from Hughes and from Rippey. You know, this is how you do it, and Jimmy just stuck with it that way. And I'll be honest with you, I think that Jimmy is a bourbon genius. I really do.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that he is so humble and he is so down to earth as a person that people miss it. But I think that deep inside of his mind, he sees things differently than you or I do. I think that he has this understanding. It's almost like a savant or something. I think that he just has this understanding of bourbon, like other people, like Steve Jobs to computers, or Henry Ford to cars. I mean, Jimmy. It's like you know, Jimmy is bourbon. I mean, it's really quite amazing. And
Well,
I hope I
think,
can share that in the book.
Yeah, I think that's too what lent Jimmy Russell not just being instrumental to bourbon surviving through the dark periods, but also the fact that he was willing to go out and market it.
Mm-hmm. Hit the road
when nobody else cared about it or
Booker,
cared to
right?
do it. Exactly.
Elmer, yeah. They went out and hit the road.
And you know what's so funny too? I've said this so many times. It amazes me that Jimmy and Booker and Elmer and Parker Beam, all independently of each other said, I want to go out and make this important again. And we owe it to them really now that bourbon is doing as well as it is, and that we are able to sit here on a Thursday night at 10 o'clock and have these conversations. We owe Jimmy so much for bourbon being what it is in 2018.
Right. And he would not take full credit for it.
No,
he would do exactly what you said. He would point, to Booker, and he'd point to Elmer and Parker, and he would say, we all did it because we helped each other. And he said that before. You can watch videos of Jimmy or listen to Jimmy or even ask Jimmy, they help each other out is what, he says. And they've done it in the past and they continue to do it now. I think that we have this enthusiast community and they have their own, industry community, and it's very close and tight knit and family oriented. And it's really unique. It really is. And I'm sure there are other industries out there that have some similar traits, but I can't think of one off the top of my head.
Either. I can't name one like that.
It's mostly cutthroat competition, with mutual respect. This is a little bit different. This is, I think that when one hurts, the other one feels it. And there's this pull to help them. And I don't think you see that in a lot of other industries.
I don't think so either.
Like with the Heaven Hill Fire and the help that they were given. And there's numerous examples. But you don't see that very often in other industries. And I think that's one of the many cool things that make this hobby so fun and exciting and rewarding to be involved in.
Absolutely. Well, let's wrap the conversation up with just two more questions, and then we'll move into our review. What's the future of turkey look like to you? Where do you
think it looks great. I think it looks great. Yeah. And here's why. What Jimmy has established is something that, is going to last for years, because he has Eddie and he has Bruce carrying that torch, very loyal to what he's established. They're different in their own way. Eddie's his own person, but he has great respect for what Jimmy has established all over these years. And then Bruce is the same way, but he has his own thing. So it's kind of like they each have something that it's going to take to get to the next level, but it's all because of, the bar that Jimmy set and the foundation that he laid, for the brand. I see the future as nothing but improving and getting better and more exciting. You have a company that is actively involved in investing into the brand. Yeah. So all of the dominoes line up in a way that it's probably a bad example because dominoes fall. But what I'm saying is everything's lined up for a great future. Thanks, Russell's Reserve 2005. But a bad example. Awesome. Yeah. But everything's lined up for a great future. It really is. Yeah. And I don't see anything immediately in the way in terms of the struggle or anything that's going to take the brand anywhere but up.
Yeah. All right. One last question, then we'll get this review knocked out. But you have one Wild Turkey product that you can choose from to have for the rest of your life. What is it? Why?
Well, I mentioned it once already. Russell's Reserve Single Barrel.
I kind of figured that's where that was going, but
it's just, hey, it's a modern expression. I'm assuming you, in your question, you would allow me to go back in time if I wanted to.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And it would be hard to say, it's hard to deny 1018. Okay,
sure.
But the fact of the matter is that Russell's Reserve Single Barrel is a killer expression, and it's just an expression that I look for, on a regular basis.
Yeah.
In trying to find new, variances and this type of thing. So that's going to be what I would choose, is Russell's Reserve Single Barrel. That would be my choice.
I think that's a pretty solid answer. I'm going to give you props for that. Well, that kind of does it for our conversation portion of the show. Dave, again, thank you so much for
you're welcome
tonight, man. I want to transition now into our review, and this was another sample that you sent me as well. This was the Russell's Reserve 2002 that just came out this year, and you know what, I opened that box that you sent me, and I was going, oh, this is so cool and everything. And that was the one that I pulled out where I was like, what the heck? I was like, what is
you weren't expecting it?
No, I was absolutely not expecting it.
Right.
By any means. And, I wanted to have this as, part of what I was hoping to, consider in my, best of 2018 and everything. And it got to the point where I was like, it's probably not going to happen. And, you sent me the sample and everything. And I was like, well, now I can,
So you haven't opened it yet?
No, I haven't tried it. I haven't opened it.
Okay.
I just poured the sample that you sent me.
All right.
So here's the deal. For anybody who has never heard the show before, or is curious what our review system is like, it's a 4-tiered system. It's nose, palate, finish, and price. Each category is out of 5, and then we tally it up for a total score out of 20. And then we let you know whether or not you should, check it out. This is going to be a little bit harder for some people to find right now because it was highly allocated.
Yes, very, very small number produced. And I believe all the allocations are done and out. Every once in a while, I'll see a post on Instagram where someone found some, which is kind of unbelievable. They claim to have found them at retail, and this is as late as this past week. So it may be out there if you go looking.
But before we get too far into it, too, I want to allow Dave the opportunity to kind of walk us through some of the stats on this port too.
Okay. Well, this is a limited edition, as we had touched on. It was distilled in 2002, bottled in 2018. It's barrel proof, and all the barrels that made up this batch came from Camp Nelson. Camp Nelson is Camp Nelson is a national cemetery about an hour away from Wild Turkey. There's rick houses there that Wild Turkey acquired some years ago. And so the barrels pulled for this expression were all from Camp Nelson. And Camp Nelson kind of has its own little unique vibe to it. It's turkey, but it's not turkey. And I think you'll discover that. But it's non-chill filtered. And the proof on this one, I don't have it memorized right offhand. So 114.6. So hefty stats here. I mean, this is barrel proof whiskey, quite mature, from a unique set of rick houses, and all, of course, hand selected by Eddie.
Sure. Right off the bat, and this is really unique, but there's something kind of savory on the nose.
Yeah, it's different, isn't it?
It really is. And one of the nosing techniques that I learned from Dixon too was to go from, take your nose, put it on the bottom of the glass, and then take it and try it with the top of the glass too, furthest away from your mouth. And when I do that, when I get to the top of the glass, I lose some of those savory notes, and I start finding like these almost like apricot and a little bit of like green apple notes too, like towards the top. It's so
there's a lot there
Yeah, I mean,
on the nose.
it's so full and fruity and floral, but it doesn't overpower some of these like darker notes that are coming through too, in the glass too. And clearly that's a product of the fact that it's a freaking 16-year-old.
Yeah, it's up there.
Yeah,
It's technically, I think, 15. It just was under the 16-year mark as far as the distilled to bottled, but close to 16. And it's very unique. There is something about the Camp Nelson rick houses. When I did my barrel pick back in September, of course, I did it blind. Eddie, we decided early on that was going to be a blind tasting. I didn't know where any of these were coming from, how old they were, nothing. Sure. He poured me, 5 different samples. One of them I immediately kind of was like, this is just very close to Rare Breed, and didn't have anything kind of unique to it because I wanted something to kind of stand out.
Sure.
The other 4 I had to struggle with because it was like they were very close. And the one we ended up going with was just what I felt like was the most unique. They all ended up being from Camp Nelson, all 5 of them. The one I had kind of put out early on was a Camp Nelson A. The one I picked was a Camp Nelson F. And A is it's more true to the typical wild turkey profile. F is just really out there, is the best way for me to describe it. It is an out there rick house. There's something weird going on in F. And even Bruce had mentioned that in the One Nation Under Whiskey podcast. He mentioned that F just had something going on, strange. So this has some of that in there for sure.
So this is a rick house F?
No, this is Camp Nelson. So it's probably a blend of A and F and possibly some other ones, but it's in here. If you were to taste my selection this side by side, the 2002 is notably better. But there are some signature notes there that they share that is not common to the typical wild turkey that you find. Joshua Hatton described it as an industrial type quality, and I think you're going to find it when you have it on the palate. You're not really going to get it on the nose.
Well, I'm curious to find out what it's like on the palate. Continue.
We'll go for it.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
I see the industrial side of it.
There's something different there, right?
I definitely see that. It doesn't have quite that. I don't mean this in necessarily a bad way, but it doesn't quite have that like natural side to it. Like
I like that. There is something different there that it's hard to put a descriptor on, and I think that's Camp Nelson. And there is Joshua used industrial to describe my single barrel. He wasn't using it to describe 2002, but I think they share some traits of uniqueness, and that's one of them. I think there is this, like you said, it's not so much unnatural, maybe. Yeah, it's not natural. It's strange. There is a strange note in there.
And it's getting it once it gets towards the back of the tongue is when that strange note comes through.
The finish is kind of different, isn't it?
It really is. It's kind of perplexing. I like it.
Yeah.
I think the finish is really nice. And it's so funny because this is very much like a roller coaster bourbon.
Exactly.
I mean, even from the front end, as soon as it starts on the nose, and then it just kind of like goes through all these different motions and experiences that you find within. This is an incredibly complex whiskey.
Exactly. And I worry that by describing these odd notes, the industrial, the unnatural, the unique, this type of thing, I worry that folks are going to think that 2002 is not a quality pour, and that's not true.
No, I think it's very good.
It's a very high quality pour. It's very different. It's not Russell's Reserve 1998. If you're familiar with Russell's Reserve 1998, similar bottle, different tasting whiskey.
Sure.
Some folks are going to like 2002 better. Some folks are going to like 1998 better. To me, they're both high quality pours. They're both very complex, like you were talking about. But there is something very unique with 2002 that you're not going to find in your average Wild Turkey bottle.
I'm so stuck on this savory note that I keep finding on the nose.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like bacon.
Yeah, I can see that.
Seriously, it's almost like
I described it one time as grease.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, like bacon grease.
Yeah.
I'm totally on board with that.
Yeah. It's like there's a peppery grease type of thing going on.
How odd for a turkey product, though.
Yeah. There's something with those rickhouses at Camp Nelson. I don't know what it is, but it has these odd and more, like I said, and it's not like I've tried every single barrel that's come out of A, but I've had some store picks that were A, Camp Nelson A, and I've had experience tasting, barrel proof A. And A just seems to be a little bit more of the typical Wild Turkey, like Russell's Reserve 10, rare breedish kind of. The Fs were just all over the map, strange. And so I guarantee you there's some F in this. It could be something else, another rick house that I'm not even familiar with, but it's really good. And I will say that when I first cracked it, I had a little bit of pause there because it was so different. I was just like, this doesn't even really taste like Wild Turkey. The nose was there, but it just, but now that it's opened up, I like Russell's Reserve 2002, even more so now that it's opened up some. I don't know if I'd really change my review rating. I think I rated it appropriately, but I'm discovering new things in it that I had not discovered early on.
Even just sitting here with it, I'm starting to find more as it's starting to open up too. Mm-hmm. And there's something really like red berry-esque about it as well that's kind of predominant on the finish that is not necessarily bad.
Like a not so ripe strawberry, something like that?
Or kind of like a dark cherry. Okay. Like a real cherry, not a maraschino cherry. Mm-hmm. And
I can get that. Mm-hmm. It's
interesting, but it's almost to the point of it being maybe a little bit overpowering.
Yeah. The finish is of all the phases of 2002, the finish was my least favorite.
I kind of have to agree with you on that.
It has a slight astringency to it. Mm-hmm. It's very slight. I equated it to kind of like a pecan shell, where you get that kind of bitter when you go to get the pecan out and you get a little bit of the shell, and it's kind of like a little bitter there. It's not that, it's not overpowering. It doesn't dominate it, but it's there. It's there.
Yeah.
And I would say that you could try to add water. But when I've done that in the past, it kind of fell apart.
I'm not going to worry about it right now.
Yeah. I would leave it alone. And it's good. It's not as good as 1998. I think that, and honestly, people hate it when I say this. I think Revival's better. I mean, a little bit better. I think Revival's just, to me, Revival is just,
I gotta agree with you,
a perfect whiskey. It just like everything came together and made this beautiful whiskey. It's not flawed, but there's something there that keeps it from being perfect.
Yeah,
that's the best way to say it.
So we've kind of talked through. We haven't actually given our scores yet, though, of each category. But in the last category too is price. Dave, what's the price on this one?
$250 retail. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I think
it's fair though. Yeah, I think it's fair for it. It's a 15-year cask strength Wild Turkey.
Okay, that's fair.
I mean, look at the NDP releases that you have and their prices, and you don't even know where it came from. And
sure.
I'm not knocking Dixon. I love Dixon to death, but $200 for a 101 proof rye, for example.
You need to go listen to my episode with him.
Okay, I need to. And really I was all on board with batch 1, but batch 2, I'm just like, it's all over me. I've got it all around in different stores, and I just can't come off the $200.
I'm gonna let the man speak for himself.
Okay.
I don't want to.
But take that. Okay.
Sure.
And then say, okay, here you have a cask strength 15-year Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey, for $250 from the actual distillery with Eddie and Jimmy's signature on it. They've signed off on it. with a very limited bottle count, you've got 3,640 bottles.
Yeah.
$250 is fair and square, in my opinion. It just is.
Sure. So I have already written down my scores.
Okay.
For this pour. I'm going to let you kind of walk through number wise.
Okay.
Nose, palate, finish, and price for the listeners too, and I'll take note of them too as you're doing that. So. Okay.
Well, using my scale, I would say that the nose is probably somewhere around a 4.75 out of 5. The palate would be more like a 4.5 out of 5. And then the finish would be more like a 4 out of 5, for an average of around 4.5 out of 5. That would be my personal opinion of it.
And price wise too. I mean, do you have a kind of?
I think 250. No, I think 250 is fair. I think for what you're getting, I think 250 is fair. I wouldn't pay much more than that for it.
Sure.
I would easily pay 250 for it. I would not pay 300, 350 for it. You know.
So you're kind of in like the 16.5 range then,
yeah. Well, okay. So using your 20-point,
I'm going
scale,
on the 20-point.
You're
scale,
going to 20. Okay. So the 20-point scale. If I had to give it a rating in the 20, I'd say maybe like 17 out of 20 or so.
Yeah.
You know, if I used your scale, because you factor price in. I don't usually factor price in mine.
I do. Yeah. Because I just kind of like to include like the what's this gonna set you back if you actually go out and purchase this bottle.
So I think you're 16 and a half, 17. I think that's fair.
Yeah, I was a little bit harsher on it than you were. I agreed with you though in terms of ranking. Okay. Like the nose was the best part for me. Mm-hmm. I gave the nose a 4 out of 5. I thought that it was different. I thought that it provided some of these notes that you're not typically going to find in turkey products, but just kind of in bourbon, in a bourbon in general, I thought that it was really unique and different. Palate though was a 3.5 for me. Mm-hmm. I again thought that it was interesting, but it just kind of lacked a little bit of something that I can't quite put my finger on, and I wish I had more of this whiskey so I could spend a longer time with it. But my immediate reaction with it is that it's good, but it's just missing a little something. But at the same time, like it's enough goodness and enough interesting to push it over like average, I would say. So 3.5 for me there. Finish though is a little too astringent for me. I would say I gave it a 2.5.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that's very fair.
Yeah.
And here's the thing about ratings and reviews. I think that you have to be honest. I think you have to give your personal opinion, exactly how you feel about it. For sure. And, not everyone is going to like 2002. I can tell you that for sure. It is, honestly, this 2005 Russell Reserve 10 year, I could see many more people liking this more than 2002.
I prefer it.
Yeah. So, and that is not an uncommon thing. Yeah. Having a bottle of it, I've grown to appreciate it in a new way. Like I said, I don't think I'd change my score. I just find different things in it than I found when I first opened it.
Sure.
But if someone just put a big pile of cash in my lap and said, "Go buy some wild turkey," it's not going to be on the top of my list. I'm going to be honest with you.
I think I'd rather have like a Dusty the Canter.
I'd rather have some donuts. Some CGF. I mean, I'm just going to be honest with you. Or here's where I'll be straight honest. There are a few Russell's Reserve single barrel private selections that I've had in the past that I would love to have tons of if they existed.
Sure.
And so it would not be on the top of my list. And I think that your review is fair, very fair. I've seen reviews of 2002 all the way from stellar, unbelievable, oh my God, this is the best whiskey ever made, to like, yeah, it's all right. And I kind of fell somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. Price-wise, I gave it a 3.5.
Okay.
I agree with you in that it's, for it being the age that it is and being as unique as it is, I think that is enough to kind of, again, push me past this point of like, am I really going to spend the money on it? But at the same time, like, that some of the quality factors of it would, bump it down a little bit for me. I think it's fair in the essence of it being what it is at face value. But based on what I, got from it, that's what knocked it back a little bit.
I could see that, because you could pick up something off the shelf like a Russell's Reserve Single Barrel Private Selection. And if it were a stellar selection, and there have been a good many this year, I'll be honest with you, especially from like Rickhouse B and D and a few from H. And you're like, you pay $55, $60, $65 for those. And then you've got Russell's Reserve 2002, and you got to say, I could get a case of these.
Exactly.
I could get one of these. And I can't fault someone for saying I'd rather have a case of this private selection. I really can't.
I mean, especially if it's an incredible private selection and you just absolutely love it. I would probably have to, err on the side of the people who go, yeah, I'd buy a case. I mean, honestly, I would fall in that camp more.
And I'm going to give you one example.
Okay, go ahead.
And there's two from this year that really, borderline three, that have really just killed it this year. And I don't want to spoil my review, because my next review is one of these. Single Cask Nation picked two barrels this year that were stellar, both from K. There was a K off-profile barrel that was 9 years, that was so unique and so classic turkey that, I just love every bit of it.
Yeah.
And then this latest one they just released from K, Rickhouse K, is 10 years, is like this earthy monster that is just smoky and rich, and it's just...
Considering they normally do scotches, that doesn't surprise me that's...
Well, I'm having a very hard time reeling myself in on the rating, because there was a moment there where I was like, I might give this a 5 out of 5, and I didn't.
Wow.
Okay. And I'm not going to say what my score is, but I came very close, because there was one night where I was just like, I don't know if you're going to find much better of a barrel than this at Wild Turkey.
Sure.
And that's just my personal opinion. And then the other would be the Master Distiller Selection that was at the Visitor Center this year. There was a Master Distiller Selection that was chosen by Jimmy Eddy, Fredno, and Chris Morris.
Right.
And it was just killer. Just killer barrel. And so if someone said, hey, I've got a case of the Master Distiller Select, I'll trade you for a Russell's Reserve 2002, I'll be like, done. I will take that offer.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
It's great.
So I gave it a 13.5 out of 20 total.
Okay.
And I think that this is a pour that you kind of, I recommend trying it. I don't know if I recommend buying a whole bottle of it, unless you are a Wild Turkey
Definitely don't buy it at secondary.
Oh no, absolutely.
Just don't.
Absolutely not. I don't.
Unless you've tried it and you know what you're getting into.
And you think it's amazing.
It's a different beast.
Yeah.
It's different.
Yeah.
So I think that's wisdom.
Yeah.
I like that.
Thank you.
You're welcome, man.
Well, that kind of wraps it up for this episode. Dave, again, I want to say thank you so much for hanging out with me.
Oh, thank you.
This evening. And...
It went a little long. I apologize for that.
Oh, it's okay.
We had a lot to pack in.
Man, the longer the podcast, the better. Usually, but okay. I'm always happy to hang out, have a good time, share some pours and good stories. So, where can people find you on social media if they would like to do that? Okay,
well, my blog is RareBird101.com. Plenty of reviews there. There's some other articles and different resources there. You can find me on Instagram at RareBird101, and you can find me on Twitter at RBird101. And last but not least, I have a Patreon site, which is patreon.com/RareBird101. And I want to say thank you to all my Patreon supporters, because you know what? I'm going to have to say right now that when I started that Patreon site, I believe it was in May, I thought I might have a little handful of people by the end of the year. And to have 90 patrons today, it blows my mind. And you guys are just so generous. And I love talking with you, and the posts that you put up on the community and the comments that you make is just it's quite rewarding. It can make a bad day good. So I can have a bad day at work because I have a real job. So I can have a bad day at work and I can come home to these awesome community posts or comments, and it just really makes things great. And then also I need to say thank you to my followers on social media, especially Instagram. I have a lot of folks there that really are supportive, but very, very important to me to tell my patrons thank you. I'm
one of those patrons too, and
you are.
I have to say it's a really fun community to
thank you
and hang out. Of course, man. So definitely go and check that out. If you want to keep up with us on social media, at My Bourbon Pod, of course, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Post there just about every other day, keeping you updated on everything that's going on. You can find the podcast, of course, on iTunes and Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, all over the place. 5-star rate and review on iTunes, please. That helps us out so much. You can head to bourbonshop.threadless.com if you would like to find our merch and apparel. We have a sale that I'm going to actually extend until the end of the year to continue to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the podcast. Of course.
Congrats.
Hey, thank you, man. I appreciate that. Also, patreon.com/mybourbonpodcast is where you can find my Patreon page.
Which I'm a patron too.
Yes, you are a patron. And everybody who gets early access to this episode actually is because they are patrons and they are watching it being recorded live via Google Hangouts and all that good stuff. So if you would like to have early access to episodes and video reviews and all this kind of good stuff that I've been cranking out recently, patreon.com/mybourbonpodcast. Thank you all again so much for listening. Dave, thanks for hanging out with me, man. Thanks for the words and everything. Cheers to you too. I think I'm gonna have to send you a sample flight too.
No, you don't have to, man.
No, I'm gonna do it.
All right.
You can't say no.
Okay.
RareBird101, Dave Jennings. Thank you so much for hanging out.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Everybody who's listening, thank you all so much. I'll see you next week. But until then, I'm Perry, and this is My Bourbon Podcast.